Welcome into the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Just Barry Allen and myself today. And we're going to talk SEC baseball. Barry, a kind of lighter slate of midweek games. The SEC takes all of them yesterday except Vanderbilt falls to Louisville. The Commodores now have lost 3 in a row for the first time since 2018. But other than that, I guess not much of note in the league yesterday.
No, not really. A couple of rainouts. UAB at Auburn was rained out. If you lived in Alabama, you could easily see why. I mean, we had like 3 inches of rain in Tuscaloosa yesterday. Incredible weather event. And the Samford, Alabama game was canceled prior to yesterday. Again, Alabama canceling a midweek game. No reasons were given, but that's ULM and Samford they've bailed on in 2 weeks in the midweeks. And then South Carolina was rained out last night with North Florida, but they've rescheduled for today. And A&M got a win at UT Arlington. Well, actually played at Globe Life Stadium where the Rangers played. So that's 4 SEC teams that's played there this year and has done quite well. And then Ole Miss, geez, they got an 11-2 lead against a pretty good Arkansas State team last night. And the next thing you know, it's 11-10. And they win 15-13 and have to bring Derek Diamond in the 9th to get the last out with the go-ahead run at the plate, actually. And they were stunned that they even played the weather they had. But when the game started, it was sunny and really nice. And Ole Miss fell behind and then came back and went up 11-2. And next thing you know, the Red Wolves are right back in it. And it was a very entertaining game. It lasted all of 4 hours and 4 minutes last night in Oxford. So a very entertaining game last night. And so the Rebels able to, pick up a win. And, Van Cleve had 4 hits for him last night. So a pretty good night overall, 3 straight losses for Vanderbilt. I don't think that's panic button time. I don't think it's time to go press all the panic buttons and go crazy. I mean, you're going to play bad. We've said they were going to play bad at some point this year. Louisville's a pretty good team. That was a big game for them yesterday. If they can get some stability in the next couple of weeks in the ACC, they may be able to get a host spot in that 16 group. They're probably not there right now. But that was a good win for Louisville yesterday. I thought both starters, even Little's numbers, you look at his numbers, not very good with 6 runs, but for a couple of innings, I thought he was really good. And I thought the Louisville left-hander was outstanding. And, they're trying to get him in some, maybe some weekend work. He's, third year guy, and he's only, I think coming into yesterday, he'd only pitched like 20 innings total in his career. Just had command issues, but he was pretty good yesterday. And one thing I took from that game I thought was really interesting, and we talked about this yesterday on the podcast about how these 2 programs were, nothing. And that's not being ugly. I mean, they weren't. I mean, nobody even knew Vanderbilt, Louisville played baseball, prior to Dan McDonnell and Tim Corbin. And I don't know, Chris, if you saw the graphic they put on the SEC network yesterday, but since 2007, how about Vanderbilt's got 641 wins and Louisville had 641 going into yesterday. And of course whoever won the game was going to go ahead. So now it's 642 Louisville and 641 for Vanderbilt. That's the top 2 wins in the country since 2007. I thought that was a pretty impressive stat yesterday.
Yeah, I did too. I got a chance to watch that game. Christian Little was Vanderbilt's starter, and he was a kid who started the AFLAC or whatever they call it, All-American game last year, came to campus at 17, enrolled in the winter. But if you want a classic case of what experience means, and I don't mean to dog Christian Little, but that's one of those, if you reassemble the box score, it doesn't make sense. If you watch it, it does, because there were just elements of self-destruction kind of written all over that start. And here's what I mean. He's a kid who has just been able to dominate everybody, I'm sure, throughout his life, because most high school kids aren't going to be able to handle the 95-mile-an-hour fastball when it's offset by some other decent secondary pitches. But at the college level, where they get detailed scouting reports, maybe where they can guess pitch sequences, where you fall behind in counts, that lessens your advantage with that. And then he hits a guy at the wrong time, sails a pickoff throw, into center field, throws a wild pitch that scores a run. They had a defensive miscue where Dominic Keegan has a ground ball hit to him. Probably should have just taken the out at first. Instead, tries to throw to second in what I thought was not a good decision anyway. Then he gets the ball lodged in his glove, and next thing you know, a guy's safe. That was one of those games where we talk about the importance of experience, and this is one thing we talked about going into the season, Barry. We thought that teams that had a lot of fourth, fifth, sometimes sixth-year players might have an advantage, and that's going to be interesting to watch in postseason. How that plays out. Vanderbilt really probably had the youngest lineup in the league. It's held its own anyway, and now that team is getting to a point where most of these kids have never played this much baseball, and they got exams and stuff to deal with. It really is going to be interesting to see how teams who are the more veteran teams, do they emerge, do they not emerge down the stretch, or does raw talent win out from here forward in SEC play and in the NCAA tournaments, all those sorts of things. But I thought, if you watch Christian Little, that was just kind of a classic example in the difference between a pitcher who has experience and one who doesn't. And I think that learning curve for him showed how it can fall apart on you yesterday the way it did.
Yeah, they had a lot of issues. You talk about that play with Keegan, you'd probably just better serve to step on the bag, take the out, and then what the ball Pinellas hit, 2-0 pitch, and Little leaves one up in the zone, and he made a mistake and he paid for it dearly. I think it cleared the stadium. Dave Neal and Chris Burke thought it landed on the train, not on the tracks, but on the train, and they were still talking in the eighth inning. Wonder where that ball is now. Wonder how far that train's moved up the highway, because it was a bomb, and he did not miss it. It was a pitch up in the zone, and he, Little made a mistake, and Pinellas made him pay for it. So there's where you talk about your inexperience versus your experience. Your young pitcher feeling his oats on the mound against a veteran guy who's been there and been to World Series and been to regionals and helped his team win games. And that was a moment where Louisville won that moment yesterday with a experienced guy at the plate. Really, that changed the game, obviously. But I think even at Florida, even the game they won Friday night, you watched it. I didn't get to see much of that game, but even Friday night they won at Florida. They just didn't. That's like 4 games in a row now. They just haven't really looked like Vanderbilt.
No,
that's just not who they are. I know they're in the midst of exams, and it's tough to travel, during exams and then come back, and they're taking exams, and they'll be finished, I think you said Friday, and then they can focus the last 10 games, nothing but baseball. And I think that's where Tim Corbin's at his best when, not that he's not any good so far, but I'm just warning he's at his best when he's just got those kids and that's all they're focused on is baseball, Vanderbilt baseball. And I think that's when they really take off. And I think, with the exception of going to Ole Miss next week, I think Alabama and Kentucky at home really, favors them. And, I'm not saying they're not going to win the series at Ole Miss. They certainly can, but that'll be the toughest of the 3 that they have left. And but they'll be more relaxed. They'll be just playing baseball and doing the things that they like, and then focus on the tournament and focus on the NCAA tournament. So I'm not ready to push the panic button on Vanderbilt just yet. I think they're still really good, and they're going to be in the mix, for this SEC championship, as will Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi State as the last 3 weeks come and go.
Well, if anybody's listening to this podcast for the first time or one of the first times, Blake and I are based in Nashville, and I'm over at Hawkins Field a lot seeing them. I know Tim Corbin pretty well, and I'm pretty close to that program. And so I know that, and a lot of people make a big deal of the scholarship situation with them. I think that's overblown because some of these kids are still paying 40, 50, 60 grand out of pocket, even after what the school kicks in for things. So there's that. And number 2, the school just doesn't do them a lot of favors with facilities. They don't have priority registration for players. So people may be listening and saying, well, wait, every other team in the league has exams too. And yes, that is true. It's not like, I don't think it's easy for any of these kids. So you stack that up against what Vanderbilt's done. You say a lot of teams are sort of in the same boat, but I think everybody knows the class load there is tougher than it is a lot of places. I think with Vanderbilt, I don't think the challenge all the time is getting kids in. It's can the kids do the work once they get there? Because again, there's no quarter at Vanderbilt for academics, and so you've got to really do the work and put in the time, and you're doing road trips and all those sorts of things, and exams again where you don't get priority registration and stuff like that. And I just think that this team has looked tired to me, but I think when they flip the page here in a couple of days for Alabama coming to town, and they don't have exams and all that stuff to deal with, it'll be interesting to see if they get a burst of energy and sort of some improved performance, because they just have not looked really good for the last week. But you mentioned something about Ole Miss, Barry. And if you got a comment there on that, I'll let you go. But I wanted to flip the script to the Rebels in just a minute.
Just on the exams, I know everybody does them. So there's 14 teams. They're all taking finals. They're all graduating. But I know there used to be a policy in the league that if you were taking exams, you typically didn't go on the road the weekend prior to exams. And I know in the instance for Alabama, because I live in Tuscaloosa, so I follow them a little closer than everyone else. And you guys live in Nashville and follow Vanderbilt a little closer because you're there around them every day. Both of those teams were on the road prior to taking final exams. Mm-hmm. Vanderbilt went to Florida, come home and take exams. Alabama went to Kentucky, comes home and takes exams. Alabama graduated last Saturday, so they were through with exams Friday. So they essentially had about 4 series or 3.5 series without schoolwork. And Vanderbilt's going to have, finish exams Friday. So they're going to have 2 series, and then the Alabama series the day of that exams end. I know Auburn exams were last week, and they were home against Florida the week before. Auburn graduated on Saturday. I happen to know that. My niece graduated from Auburn this year, and my cousin graduated from Auburn with a degree in pharmacy, got her doctor's degree at Auburn this past week. So 2 of my family members walked on Saturday and then Monday. So I know their graduation and their exam schedule. The others, I'm not, completely sure about what they were, but a lot of these teams used to be, the league made it where if you had exams starting Monday, you were home the weekend prior to exams, and then you could travel the week of exams. But that apparently doesn't always shake out now, because I know for sure that Auburn and Vanderbilt, or Alabama and Vanderbilt, were on the road and then came home to take exams. And I don't know what that has anything to do with it, if that makes any difference or whatever, but that's just something that I know from experience that used to not happen that way, and that looks like it does a lot.
Well, I know Vanderbilt, you say exams this week, they had them last week too, so that Florida series was kind of right in the middle of it. I think their exams go on for a while there. But I want to ask you about Ole Miss, because the way I like to look at teams, I like to take what they've done, kind of take the parts out of the box and put the machine back together and say, what does this look like going forward with the talent they've got, with the pieces? Sometimes you have pieces that have been missing. Like we talked about, Tim Elko's been gone for a while. Don't know what his future is. Doug Nikhazy missed some time. He's been back. He's been tremendous since he's come back. Gunnar Hoagland missed a start. He was back last week and was just outstanding. Ole Miss is the team that, to me, I take the parts out of the box, I put them back together, and I reassemble it. To me, this team is better than it's shown. Now, maybe the issue is the bullpen, but, man, when you got 2 starters like Nikhazy and Hoagland who can go so deep into games, and I know yesterday was a midweek game, but Ole Miss generally has arms. I just continually am surprised when I see an Ole Miss game and the opponent has scored double-digit runs, because it just doesn't make sense to me, given how talented that team is.
Yeah, those games happen like last night. I mean, Arkansas State's a pretty good offensive team. I mean, they had a guy hitting in the 2-hole that was in the top 2 or 3 in every category, in the Sun Belt Conference. And I know that's not the SEC, but you run into situations in the midweek where, you have to be careful who you pitch, and you don't want to burn up your arms. It's easier to pitch on Tuesday and come back Friday, Saturday, Sunday than it is to have a Wednesday game. That's why you don't see a lot of Wednesday games out there, just because it's easier to get the pitching back, on par. But yeah, they seem to be, Arkansas, I know, scored a ton of runs on them. LSU had almost double digits with 9 and 11 last night. And they threw a lot of down the line guys last night trying to get them some work and ended up having to go to Diamond at the end of the game. But, they don't have Max Chofie. He's been out all year pretty much. He's pitched in 2 games. That's someone that they were counting on. Mitch Murrell has pitched some, but not a lot. Cole Baker's pitched a little bit. Mallett's through last night. He's, 4-1 record, but 32 hits in 23 innings and 6.85 ERA, and it actually went up last night. Myers has pitched decent, 5.14 ERA. Miller, 14 appearances, 17 innings, 17 strikeouts, but a 4.67 ERA. So you look at Hogland and Broadway, and then everybody else is, I'm looking for Nikhazy. He hadn't shown up on here yet, but Nikhazy, Hogland, and Broadway, really about the only 3 guys among their regulars, that have sub 4 ERAs. Everybody else is, is high up there. Nikhazy's 209 among the guys that pitch a lot. Gunnar Hogland's 247 and Broadway's 273, and then nobody else that's pitched substantial innings is below 4. So they've had some issues on the mound, but they've had some injuries. Nikhazy's missed 2 starts. Hogland's missed a start. Chofie's been out, as we said, for quite a while. He's only pitched in 2 games, and he's been out all year, and he's been a vital piece of their puzzle for them for a long time. And I think Broadway had a couple of issues in a couple of back-to-back weeks where they used him a lot. 19 appearances. He's got 9 saves and 4 wins. So 13. He's been in 13 of their 32 wins. Maybe had to use him more than they wanted, and he ran into some trouble at Mississippi State, and then again against LSU. Seemed to get back on track now. So, their offense is good. I think it's gotten better. McCants has really had a great year. He's a freshman leading their team at 352. He's in the top 5 in the league in hitting going into the game last night. Graham's really picked up since Elko's been gone. Jacob Gonzalez is having a really good year. I think he's a freshman. I know McCants is a freshman. So, two of their – take Elko out because he's injured. But 2 of their top 3 hitters are freshmen. And then you got Dunhurst has had a good year. Bench has had a really good year at 323. And Schottenjay is at 318. So they've been able to score. And they ran into just some tough luck. Go to Florida. Then they got – Arkansas at home, and then they go to Mississippi State. I mean, that's pretty hard 3 weeks for anybody, to try to navigate that 9-game maze with at Florida, Arkansas at home, and at Mississippi State. And unfortunately for Ole Miss, they went 3-6, and you probably thought 4-5 or 5-4 would have been. They probably went in there going, if we go 4-5 or 5-4, we're in pretty good shape. And they're really only 3-6, so they're really only 1 or 2 games off of what they probably thought they could be, going into those series. I don't think anybody realistically thought that you could win all 3 of them. I'm sure they want to, and they thought that, but realistically, that's probably not likely playing those, especially Florida and Mississippi State on the road in 2 out of 3 weekends with Arkansas sandwiched in between, and then. Maybe just LSU kind of caught them off guard. It's a Thursday start series, and it's a bad LSU team. And, they were due to, or that's how they're perceived, a bad team. And so maybe they just thought, we're going to win this. And then they get beat Thursday night, and they get peppered Friday and then Saturday. And I think the turnaround for them Saturday coming back and winning was a real key because they've won every SEC game since then, and they've won all their games since then. They've played well, and I thought, their offense was good last night. The pitching, you can kind of, I'm sure Mike Bianco's not happy they gave up 13 runs, but I think he probably understood who he pitched and different guys, and they got some guys some work, and they got out of there with a win, and now they can, focus on Georgia this weekend and try to win that series against Georgia, and then turn around and get ready for Vanderbilt. They got A&M this weekend and get ready for Vanderbilt, and then at Georgia to end the year. So I think they're in better shape than people think. And if they can win that series with Vanderbilt, I think they're back in the mix for maybe even a top 8 national seed.
Oh, I think so too. And this is why I think they're so tough. On offense, they have got 7 regulars who have on-base percentages of 400 or better, and really go to conference play, that doesn't change a lot. In fact, you got 7 who were over 400 in league play too, I believe. So, or if not, they're really close to it. Now, one of those is Tim Elko, right? And so we don't know where that's going to go. But I mean, even without him, they've got McCants and Dunhurst and Leatherwood and Graham and Gonzalez and Bench and Shottenjay. And I mean, I just look, and we talked about how Arkansas was so tough to pitch to because the lineup is deep. And I would rather pitch to a team with a couple of guys that you have to worry about because you can pitch around them a little bit than pitch to a team where you get into 7 and 8 and there's no easy outs there. I think that's Ole Miss to a T. Then I look at their pitching, and frankly, inning per inning, and I know they both missed some time, but Nikhazy and Hoagland have been probably the best 2 starters in the league. And they get those guys back for the postseason. I mean, they're back now. Now, I get that Diamond has been hit and miss, probably more missed than hit. The bullpen outside of Broadway, I don't know where their answers are, but I look at Ole Miss and think, man, if those guys can just get out of a regional, I know the Super is the place where they've been hung up. I think that Ole Miss, to me, might have a tougher time getting out of a regional than a Super just because of the way this team is constructed.
That's a good point. You talk about, you've got those 2 guys, Nikhazy and Hoagland, and Broadway. I mean, you may not have to worry about game 3, but you got to win a 3rd game in a regional. And if you slip up in one of the first 2 games, and you got to win you got to win another game to win it. The bullpen has had some issues, but I think if they can find their way, Kimbrell has pitched well, some 4-0 record. Johnson's pitched pretty well. Drew McDaniel's 4-0. He's kind of like their number 3 guy now. More hits than innings pitched, but strikeouts are 48 to 43 innings pitched. I think Miller and Myers and Diamond and maybe Mallets are the keys for them. If they can figure out the next 10 games, these guys, how to get things rolling along with those guys, if they can fix that, then I think they've got enough. And their offense is certainly there. And I keep being enamored. Every time I watch them play, I'm just more and more enamored with this TJ McCants. I mean, he's just an incredible player.
Yeah.
I mean, this is his stat. These are his stats in the SEC. 352 and overall, 37 games, 352 average, 544 slug, and a 432 on base percentage. Now, these are his numbers in SEC play. 373 average, 613 slug, and 448 on base percentage. He's better against better teams than he is the other teams. And I know they've played some good non-conference. UCF supposed to be really good, hadn't had the year, but Texas Tech, TCU in that tournament, has had some chances to play. But this guy's stepped up when it was step-up time, and he's played really, really well for them. And his numbers are incredible. He's got 9 extra base hits out of his 28 hits. He's got the 4 home runs. He hit the game-tying grand slam against LSU that, that may have turned their season around. I mean, they really may have. They haven't lost since then. And he's got 10 walks, and he's 6 for 6 in stolen bases in SEC play. And he's 6 for 6 in stolen bases overall. So it's funny he didn't steal any bases in the non-conference. All of his bags have come in SEC play. But more and more I watch that kid play, the more and more I'm impressed with him in center field and the way he handles the bat and the maturity that he is for such a young kid.
Yeah, he and Enrique Bradfield at Vanderbilt are just physically so similar. Now, Bradfield steals a lot more bases. He leads the league. McCants has got some more pop, but those are 2 kids that if they're your center fielder, you're feeling really good about the direction of your program in that spot for the next couple of years.
Yeah, you take either one of those guys and go, your recruiting coordinator, somebody calls and go, hey, I found a center fielder you might like it. Nah, it's all right. I got one. He's not better than my guy, I can assure you. And that's kind of what Mike Bianco and Tim Corbin would say, to somebody who calls, about a center fielder. And I think we're pretty good for 2 more years. I think we'll stay with what we got. And 2 really good electric players. And, I think, Bradfield leads off. McCants in the middle of the lineup for him. So those are 2, really good players and really good center fielders, and both teams are real happy with, to have what they have in those guys. But it's talking about McCants. He's got 14 extra base hits overall out of 44 hits. So almost a third of his hits are extra bases, and just a really solid player all the way around.
What are we thinking about Tim Elko? Does he come back and make a full contribution?
I don't know that they can answer that. Even the Ole Miss folks, I don't know. He didn't play last night. They talked about him quite a bit during the broadcast. Richard Cross and Keith Kessinger did during the game last night, but I don't know. I think they probably pick their spots with him and use him when they, just need somebody. I think they wanted to give him a shot the other night against South Carolina. It was a game they had in the 8th inning. They figured they had that in hand with Broadway on the mound, and I figured let's see what he can do. And I think he felt good. He said on the SEC show after the game that it felt fine, and he was really emotional that everybody paid that much attention to him, coming into, pinch hit. He didn't know that it would be that big of a thing. He said everybody just started yelling and hollering, and he said I was like, wow, I'm just going to pinch hit. It's not. But he was real emotional about how they acted and treated him and that. And I think if they can get him back for pinch hit role here and there, and maybe DH him some, that'll help them out a lot. And I just don't know how much he can do with that. I think it's a partially torn ACL. I don't think it's completely done. I know the plan was to wear a brace and see how he reacted to some therapy and some meds and stuff. Apparently that worked out okay, or they would not have put him in the game. But he would be a key piece for them if they can get 2 or 3 at bats out of him every weekend, or if they could get 6, game he starts and then pinch hit a couple of times. That'd be a real big boost for them on offense and just help them even more.
Okay, Barry, let's switch gears a bit. D1 baseball yesterday put out its projected field of 64. Obviously, this didn't include the midweek game yesterday, although I don't know that would have changed anything. But we talked yesterday. We felt that Arkansas and Vanderbilt were clearly the number 1 and number 2 based on resume. D1 indeed has them 1 and 2 in terms of the national seed picture. You've got Mississippi State, the 4 overall. You've got Tennessee, the 7. And then you go down other teams in the league. Ole Miss, a 10. I think Ole Miss is going to end up being better than a 10, but we will see. I guess the big surprise, and I don't know where the committee is going to fall on this, but right now, Florida, the 14, according to D1. I can argue that that's right. I think everyone knows the Gators are talented. They were everybody's preseason number 1. The RPI is going to be the thing, right? Because Florida right now is 29, 28. So, according to RPI, you don't ever see really a team hosting in that area, at least not from the SEC. Okay, Florida's 27 this morning, according to Warren Nolan officially. So winning yesterday moved the Gators up a little bit. But generally, when you see a team hosting with an RPI in the range where the Gators is, that's a team from the Big West or maybe the Pac-12 or maybe a team that geographically is in a part of the country where you don't see hosts a lot and in a conference that there's not a powerhouse or something like that, or maybe the Big Ten. So now this year the RPI is different, right? And that's the X factor that we don't know how to adjust for, is you have teams that are only playing within the league. You had non-conference schedules cut down. I mean, this is a guess, right? I think D1 is as tied in and as knowledgeable and intelligent as anybody doing this, but that's one of the things that is just the wild card is how is the NCAA going to treat Florida? The Gators are only 6-9 against the top 25 RPI teams. They haven't played anybody from 26 to 49, so no way to kind of pad a resume there. Nothing too disastrous beyond that. But I don't know. Florida's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I think that if Florida wins 2 or 3 in Lexington this weekend, I would think the Gators are in good shape. But boy, You coming to that series winning one or none, and I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough hill for the Gators to climb. But what do you think?
Well, I think the one thing the X factor talking about is we just don't really know how they're going to weigh the RPI this year. Um, and just listening to you talk and reading the story yesterday and looking at the bracket yesterday, I don't know that the NCAA is going to do this. I don't know that if Kendall and Aaron have insight that the rest of us don't know. I'm sure they might. I wouldn't be shocked if they do. Maybe they've talked to committee members. Maybe they've talked to people, and maybe, and God help us all, they'll hate us for sure now. Maybe the SEC is going to get a little bit more this year, simply because they, played a full 56 game schedule in non-conference games and just got after it. And they're going to be rewarded for that. And these other leagues, didn't. The Big Ten, playing only a Big Ten schedule. Reading Mark Etheridge's column Monday about who he thought the 16, 20 host sites would be, with Nebraska losing to Rutgers over the weekend in a series. There's not a Big Ten team that's going to host, and nor should they. And he said, based on playing each other, they just don't have enough. They just don't have enough wins and quality wins and body of work to get them in that mix. And so maybe it's, you're looking and you go, well, if we're going to put the 16 best teams at home, maybe 7 or 8 of them this year are from the SEC because they've played all those games. I mean, they have Pittsburgh at 15. What Pittsburgh hadn't played in 2 weeks, 3 weeks now because of COVID. And I think they're a very good team. I mean, I think Pittsburgh is a very good team, but it's hard for me to judge a team, that doesn't play, because I mean, I know that they have issues with COVID or whatever, but it's just hard to say, well, you didn't play 3 series, but you're still pretty good. So we'll get, it's hard for me to, say that they deserve to be wherever they are. They're 20-11. I'm just going to say Pittsburgh, who's 15th, just right below Florida. And their Louisville series was canceled. Their Northern Kentucky series was canceled, and they're supposed to play West Virginia today. We'll see if that happens. And then they host Boston College this weekend. So they haven't played since they lost 10-9 to North Carolina on April the 18th. That's not easy either, because now you hadn't played in over 2 weeks. So they could be rusty, and then they could come back and lose 5 or 6 in a row. And on the flip side of that, because they had COVID and couldn't play, well, it disrupted their rhythm, and they might have been better than what they were if they'd have been able to play. So I think you have to look at all those factors. I think you have to take things in. And, Florida's playing in a good league, and what it looks like they're going to finish what? Who in the world would have ever thought what Florida's going to finish tied for, maybe 5th or 6th in the league? This is a preseason number 1 team, and they're going to finish 5th or 6th in this league. So how good are those other 5 or 6 teams, 4 or 5 teams ahead of them? So maybe they do. And of course, if you look at Kendall and Aaron's projections, you got your all Florida regional minus South Alabama there. But, we talked about yesterday, regionalizing these regionals, and there you go. Florida State, number 2, South Alabama, number 3, and Florida A&M, number 4. So, a couple of 3 easy bus rides for teams to Gainesville. No flights or anything like that. Just there you go. And so it looks like some of these are being, Mississippi State, a 4. They have them projected with Southern Miss, Tulane, and Jackson State. So it looks like they're regionalizing. But Florida's interesting. If they win all 3 of their series, which one of them would be Arkansas, they definitely going to be in the mix. And if they struggle, then they're probably going to slip out of that 13 and down, or out of 14 and below, and then they're going to be on the road. And then where do you send them? Do you not have a regional in Florida? So many teams. I mean, I think that happened a few years ago, did it not? But not often do you not have a team in Florida hosting a regional. But that they look like they're the only chance to host in the state is Florida. I don't think anybody else is in that mix right now, unless Miami gets hot or Florida State gets hot at the end. But, certainly interesting to keep an eye on the Gators and see what happens in the last 3 weeks.
Okay, this is a fresh thought I just had, so feel free to poke holes in this, okay? But what the NCAA did is they said, we're going to select our host with 2 weeks to go in the regular season and then a conference tournament, right? So is D1 Baseball astutely pointed out yesterday in the article that Mark Etheridge did, the steaks are 80% cooked when you serve them for dinner. Now, I think that at least the committee was wise enough to say, hey, wait a minute, let's build in some margin for error, so we're going to pick 20. But tell me if I'm wrong. The thinking behind this was to make sure that all these host sites meet COVID protocols and whatnot, right?
I think so. I'm sorry, I lost track.
Well, no, that's all I wanted, because here's where I'm going with this, Barry. Why not just say, who cares if 30 or 40 apply? If they all check the boxes, why do you need to narrow it to 20 right now? And let me give you an example, okay? And this is where this is going to be really tough. I'm looking at Mark Etheridge's yesterday, his thing where he wrote up, I think these teams are solid hosts. I agree with him. He had Florida in the 20, but we talked about Florida's RPI. And here's the thing, okay? Let's say that Florida comes out of the weekend 1-2 against Kentucky. Now, in the back of your head, if you got any common sense, you're going, this is the preseason number 1 team in the country. You see teams all the time that catch fire in the last couple of weeks, that, you see teams all the time that 2 weeks left of the season, they're hosting. 2 weeks later, they're a bubble team and maybe don't get in at the end of it. You see teams all the time that are nowhere near the bubble or on the bubble, and next thing you know, 2 hot weeks, you're hosting a regional or in the discussion for that. So here's my thing. With so much baseball to be played and so much important baseball to be played, the NCAA is going to have to make decisions. And so what do? Do you say, well, we're going to take the best 20 as it stands now and make those the teams? Or do you say, we're going to use a little projection and say these teams are on the bubble and have a chance? Or do you go a step further and you say, well, we're going to have some common sense in saying we don't think Florida is, say, one of the best 20 right now, but they were preseason number 1, and therefore we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt over somebody we're not going to put in the 20. And then what happens if that flips and Florida flops and another team that clearly should have been hosting doesn't even make the 20 right now? Or what happens if you leave Florida out and 2 weeks from now it's obvious they were a national seed? I'm glad the NCAA added 4 more teams, but I don't understand why you couldn't just say, hey, everybody who wants to host, submit your stuff. We'll check you off, and then we'll make the decision later. The more I look at this, I just think it's bad.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to take 3 weeks to, make all the COVID protocols. LSU's open.
The reason I say that is what if it's not that, then what are you waiting on, right? And everybody's getting vaccinated. People can make choices if they feel that their health is at risk to go to a stadium or not go to the stadium. We're 15 months into this. To me, doing it this way, yes, it's better than what they did a couple of weeks ago, where it's going to be, we're going to pick the 16 now. Great. I'm glad that you have added 4 more for margin for error. I still think you're better off waiting and picking the host when you always do.
You had dinner with Dan McDonnell last night, didn't you?
The funny thing is I did not hear his comments, but I saw that was a little bit of a thing on Twitter.
It was a lot of thing on Twitter. It was out there a lot. He came right out and said, it's time to open it up. He said, I'm tired of playing in front of nobody. He said, we need to open it up. He said, people are getting vaccinated. People can wear masks. He said, if you don't want to come, you don't have to come. If you want to come, we need to open it up and let them come. He said, I need a full house in here for Duke. I need a regional atmosphere so I know if we can get in a host a regional or not. He said, because I don't know, because we don't have any kind of atmosphere here. And he was very adamant after the game last night about it was time for Louisville to open up Jim Patterson Stadium and get the fans in there and pack it out. He said they're doing it in the SEC. He goes, they're doing it at Ole Miss and Mississippi State and LSU. He goes, why can't we do it? And he was very passionate about his team, and he's very passionate about trying to get people in the stands to watch his kids play and help his team, give them a lift the last couple of weeks of the season, trying to get into the host, be a host, get into the tournament. But he wants Louisville to open it up, and LSU's done it. A lot of schools have done it. I mean, if fans want to go, they should be able to go. If they don't, they want to choose to stay home, they can choose to stay home. And if they want to wear a mask, they should be allowed to wear a mask. If they don't want to wear a mask, they shouldn't be forced to wear one. And if you're vaccinated, and everybody should be able to kind of move on with what we're doing. I mean, like you said, we've done this for 15 months, and I'm not sure the mask thing is going to go completely away ever in some areas, but I think Dan's spot on that. It's probably time for Louisville to, maybe open up. And Vanderbilt too. I think Tim's expressed his concerns with that too, that he goes to Knoxville and plays in front of a raucous, semi-packed house and comes home and has 500 people there. And it's not the same. And it is a big difference. And you go to Mississippi State and Ole Miss. I mean, when they go to Ole Miss next weekend, there will be 15,000 people there. And they're going to have beer showers and water showers and Gatorade showers or whatever's in those red cups out there in right field when they hit home runs. And it's going to be electric. And I mean, Vanderbilt wouldn't have never played against anything like that this year. It's going to be a big difference for them because, they went to Florida and, I've said no one's ever gone to the game at Florida. I mean, they've never had any kind of crowds, even with the new ballpark. I'd be interested to see next year if all the restrictions are lifted, what kind of crowds they have at the new ballpark next year. But, I mean, I've been to regionals in Gainesville, no one's there. I mean, just playing Miami, nobody's there. Now they, super regional against Florida State, they've had good crowds. I've been for those, but just you go sometimes to Florida and there's just nobody there. And so I'm interested, they didn't play against a huge crowd there. They not going to play against huge crowds. Tennessee was electric. That was a place they had to fight some adversity. They were really going to have to fight some adversity at Ole Miss in 2 weeks.
I don't get why we do things the way we do, because you've had, I think the number yesterday, we've had 147 million people vaccinated. I think that's one dose. It could be two, but in any case, a lot of those, if that is a one dose thing, they're going to get two within a few weeks. And I count myself as one of those guys too. I've had one, but I'm waiting on the second. And I waited because I'm frankly not at risk. And I didn't want to be selfish and get a spot in line ahead of somebody who was at risk, like my dad, for instance. But off that for a minute, okay, I don't think that 50% capacity makes sense right now. I think it should be more. Why in the world are we saying a month and a half from now, when a lot more people are going to be vaccinated, and the vaccination, from what I understand, is basically 100% effective? Why are we already calling half capacity in Omaha? Explain that to me for an outdoor event.
I can't. I don't know why. But it goes back to your thing you said a few minutes ago, NCAA and common sense.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'm not railing on the NCAA. I got friends that work there, and they do their jobs very well. But it's not common sense. It's you have to look at it and go, look, this is going to be June. This is Father's Day weekend. We're not even to Mother's Day weekend yet. We're close. It's on Sunday of this week. So we're 4, 5, 6 weeks away from the College World Series starting, and we're already saying, well, we can only have 15,000 people here or 12,000 people here. I think that's too early. I mean, I think you, like you said, all the people vaccinated. I don't think there's a lot of restrictions in Omaha and Nebraska. I hear KP talking about it on the telecast a lot. I think the city of Omaha and I think the College World Series Incorporated would love to have full capacity with all the tailgating and everything, because they lost a ton of money last year and not having a College World Series. And I think that was canceled way too quick. I mean, that's like 5 minutes into this thing. Oh, we're not going to have the World Series. Dude, you don't even know if people are going to get sick yet. So I don't know. I don't think common sense plays a lot in it. I just don't. And it's too early. It's too early to cap it at 50, and it shouldn't be capped at 50 anyway. I think they should be able to, if people want to go, they should be allowed to go. If you don't want to go, you don't have to go. We're not making you go. We're not making you do anything you don't want to do. You don't have to go do any. If you don't want to leave your house, you don't have to leave your house. If you want to leave the house, go to the game, you ought to be allowed to leave the house and go to the game. But
yeah, let me just ask you this, because this is how I see it in my part of the country. I've not witnessed anybody rounding up people who haven't been vaccinated, who are at risk, and forcing them to go to a ballpark. Does that happen in Tuscaloosa? Because it doesn't happen in Nashville.
No, it does not. I've not seen anybody standing on the street corner with machine guns going, you are going to the game tonight, and there's nothing you can do about it. I hear more people going, why can't we go to the games? Why won't they let us go? Why won't they let us go and tailgate? Why can't we go do this? Why can't we go do that? I mean, it was 50% capacity here in Tuscaloosa for the A-Day game. They are now 50% capacity for softball and 50% capacity for baseball here. I'm interested to see what the SEC and the city of Hoover are going to do for the SEC tournament. Now, they are not bound by the 50.
I am too.
They're not bound by the 50% law of the NCAA because the SEC governs the SEC tournament. I've never really understood how the NCAA is the governing body, but everybody runs their own show. I never really have understood that. I mean, if you're the governing body.
Let me ask you something, Barry. Do you think the NCAA will put pressure on them to limit capacity in Hoover?
I don't know if they'll put pressure on them. They might suggest something, but I don't know that Greg Sankey will listen to that. I don't know that he should. I mean, what has he done that's not been right during this time? Nothing.
Well, remember when Greg Sankey, the SEC was one of the first to put it out there. We're going to play football.
And they did.
And the whole world was supposed to come crumbling down, and yet it didn't. We haven't had any athletes die. I don't know, man. It just seems like Greg Sankey has done a pretty good job of crowding out the noise and making some good decisions that turned out to be ahead of their time and good decisions.
Well, they had a football season that had 2 games canceled. They played 69 of 71 games in football. They got through a basketball season. They had some games that didn't happen, and they rearranged some schedules, and they left the weekend open so they could do some makeup games. They had a tournament, and they had an NCAA tournament. They've had a volleyball tournament. They had a soccer tournament. They're playing in the soccer NCAAs right now. Kentucky won the volleyball national championship. Now the SEC has a national champion in every sport they sponsor now. That's the last one they didn't have. Now they got it. And they played women's basketball, and they played a tournament, and they crowned a champion. And they've played all these other sports. They've had cross country. They've had indoor track. They're having outdoor track right now. They're having softball. They're having baseball. I mean, has there been an SEC baseball game canceled because of COVID?
Not within the league. No, you've got players who've missed games.
For sure.
Yeah, in fact, Vanderbilt's got a third starter that it would love to have playing, who's missed a month now for one COVID test where he was asymptomatic. But
no, now there was Tennessee and Mississippi. Tennessee had a series or something in softball. I think there was one softball series where they had some issues with that. But I mean, you don't even see anything. I mean, you see all these northern teams, northeastern schools, pause for COVID or whatever, like Pittsburgh's been down, but, are they not vaccinating their kids? Or I mean, I don't understand how that can happen if there's a vaccination now. And I don't see how games, I mean, I guess you get it if you're not obviously you can get it if you're not vaccinated, and I can see that and spread it to people that aren't, but if your pitcher's out for the weekend, I mean, and I know but if hadn't the CDC and people lax the rules, on that quite a bit, that it doesn't have to sit out as long as you used to, I mean, why is some kid out 3 weeks or 4 weeks now because of COVID? I mean, if he has no symptoms, it just seems like we've learned a lot of stuff, but we haven't implemented any new rules because by what we've learned. We just, it is what it is, and we're going to keep it that way. It's kind of like this has nothing to do with baseball, but it's kind of like the story of the little girl who came up to her mother one day and she goes, Mom, why don't you cut the roast in half and cook it in 2 pans? She goes, I don't know. That's the way your grandmother did it. So they asked grandmother, and grandmother goes, they said, why did you always cut up the roast and cook it in 2 pans? And she goes, I don't know. That's the way my mother did it. And the great grandmother was still alive. And they asked her, well, grandmother, why did you cut up the roast and cook it in 2 pans? And she goes, because I didn't have a pan big enough for the roast.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of where we are.
So instead of going and buying a big pan for the roast, they always did it that way. Well, it's because the great grandmother didn't have a big pan, so you had to do little. And that's kind of the theory that you just, you're just like, okay, whatever. But I think they're a little premature on the 50%. I think we probably should have that. But I will be very interested to see what is going on with the SEC baseball tournament. I do know they sent out a media thing the other day about applying for credentials. To me, that didn't sound like that was going to be limited to like it was in basketball. I know you and Blake talked about what each school got 3. Got to pick 3 people to go, and then some national people got to attend the SEC tournament. I know that's several months ago, indoor, outdoor. It's a little different, but it doesn't look to me like credentials for baseball are going to be limited to just a handful, because I saw that sent out the other day, and the deadline for that is, May the 20th. So be interesting to see the format, how they will let them in and who gets to come and how many people they'll have. I am leaning right now to thinking that the SEC tournament will be at its maximum capacity as they can get it, but I don't have any insight on that.
Well, I just want to wrap up with one thing here. I know that there are some kids at risk with heart conditions and things like that. And I don't minimize it. I think in that case, you play it safe, and maybe you hold a kid out who's got a condition that puts him at risk if he gets it and hasn't been vaccinated. That I get. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think a college athlete anywhere has died from COVID that I've heard. And I think if it happened, I think we would have heard.
I think you're right. There was one from Utah back in football season that was hospitalized and was really, really sick. I don't know that he passed away. I don't think he did, but I can't be 100% sure of that. But I think if someone did, I think we would probably definitely know that. And I say this, and people are listening and go, well, that's real easy for you to say, but just so I can kind of put a little bit into perspective of people with my opinion. I have a special needs child who has kidney failure, and we take dialysis 3 days a week. So we are very, very careful in our house. I'm not just shouting off this stuff. Well, everybody ought to be able to go to the game and do what they want to. I think they should be, but we're very careful here in what we do because the situation that I have with my daughter. And so it's not like I'm just some SEC baseball fan and football fan that thinks, well, we ought to be able to go to the game. I do feel that way, but we are very careful here at what we do and how we do things. And I respect people who have conditions and have medical conditions and have to take care of people. And I respect people who have the medical conditions and have to be taken care of. And I would wish absolutely nothing but the best for them. I don't wish any harm on anybody. Like I think I told you this story a couple of weeks ago. A friend of mine runs the ushers, redcoats, or whatever you want, vet staff at Alabama. They had a call about when the mask mandate went down, they were still going to require people to wear masks coming into the events and the workers. And he said, now probably in the fall when football starts, that may or may not be the case. And there was a lady on the call who worked, and she goes, well, if I don't have to wear a mask, if I can't wear a mask, then I'm not going to be able to work. And he said that Greg Byrne goes, well, why would you not be able to work? And she goes, well, I don't feel comfortable coming to your events and working without a mask. And he goes, so then don't not wear a mask. He goes, I can't tell you not to wear a mask. He said, I can't make you take your mask off. And she's like, oh, and he goes, we can only encourage you to wear them, at the games, but I can't make you take your mask off and not wear your mask. So I thought that was an interesting thing as well. And you know, it's just your choice. If you want to wear one, wear it. If you don't. But also you have to be respectful for others. And like when I said all that, it ought to be 50-50, you know, be ought to be full capacity or whatever. I say that in saying we're careful here in my house, in our house, because of the condition we have with our daughter. So I'm not just flippantly throwing off some comment that, well, I think everybody ought to be, you know, I think you ought to be, do what's comfortable for you and do what's safe for you and do what's safe for your family. And if you feel comfortable not wearing a mask, go and enjoy it. And if you feel like wearing one, wear one and go. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and just to be clear on my end, and then we'll move on. I got one more thing I want to hit before we end this. But yeah, I did the same thing. We canceled a trip to Colorado with my in-laws for Thanksgiving because we're like, what if we hop on the plane and catch it and spread it to our, you know, my wife's 70-something-year-old parents. Canceled Christmas with my parents. Same reason. They're in their 70s. We're just like, Mom and Dad, the vaccine's around the corner. You know, once we get past this, we want to see you guys a bunch. But, you know, we'd hate for something to go wrong. And so that's where I am too. But people, you know, you have the power to make your own decisions and nobody's making you go. And I just think this thing's gotten out of hand. But back to where I was going to go with Florida, Barry. So what do you do if you're the NCAA and next week you don't think Florida is one of the 20 most deserving host sites at this moment? Do you do a little projection and give the Gators one of the spots above a team that might be a little far below, but you don't think is as talented? How do you handle that?
Well, I think without being in the room with them and without being in their heads, it's hard to answer. But if you are trying to make everything regional this year, if you're trying to limit travel and keep as many people as close to home as you can, somebody in Florida has to host a regional, I think, just because there are too many teams down there that can play in a regional. And I think you just try to keep if they're trying to do that. And I don't know that they're trying to do that. Nobody said, well, this is going to be a regional. I mean, it's, you know, you look at Kendall and them's projections and, you know, there's very few of these where somebody's going to jump on an airplane and fly somewhere. I mean, Nebraska, Baylor, and Oral Roberts can all bust to Fayetteville. You know, USC, Upstate, South Carolina, and NC State can all bust to East Carolina. Now UCLA, they ain't jumping on no bus and going to Pittsburgh. So but some people are going to have to fly no matter what. Like Fairfield, if they get in, they're going to have to fly. You know, TCU now is a little different story. They got VCU, Oregon State, and Fairfield. So those are all flights. The projection they have for Gainesville, I mean, Florida A&M and Florida State are both in Tallahassee. It's 155 miles from Tallahassee to Gainesville. That's a bus. Mobile to Gainesville is not a lot further than that. So South Alabama's on a bus. So a lot of these you look, you know, these are bus trips. And it's, you know, Louisville might have to fly to Ruston in this situation, but UNO and Dallas Baptist are bus trips. Mississippi State, those are all bus trips, and those are all three teams they've played in the season, during the regular season. Jackson State, Southern Miss, and Tulane. So if they're going to make them regionalized, and no one said that's how they're going to do this, there will be some teams that have to fly because of geographics. But if they're trying to make it as easy as possible and limit flights and travel and stuff like that, somebody in the state of Florida is going to have to host. And if you're going to give it to one of the big three schools, Florida, Florida State, or Miami, then I think Florida is probably the logical place to put it.
Well, Mark Etheridge doesn't have it being that close. He's got Florida pretty well in at this point. But again, we're all projected. We're all trying to read what it is that the NCAA will do. That's a presumption that RPI doesn't matter as much, but that's a presumption. Here's another one. He said, if I had to guess the 20, I think Louisville will be in that. Well, even after Louisville beats Vanderbilt yesterday, RPI at 50. They got Duke this weekend. That's not really going to move the needle. I
Uh,
think Duke is below 500. So again, I don't know how you manage this.
yeah, Duke's 19-18, 9-15 in the league, and their RPI is 53. So I don't know how that's going to move Louisville up. I mean, I don't see how that's going to go. Oh, they beat Duke. Well, good for you. Well, not Coach K in Duke. It's baseball Duke, who has a one game over 500. So I don't know that that's going to help Louisville, at all. I don't know how that's going to bolster their regional hosting chances. You look at them; they're if I can add correctly, 16-11 against Quad 1 and Quad 2 teams, and they have Duke, they have North Carolina, and Miami left on the schedule. Miami's a projected NCAA tournament team. North Carolina's right above them in the RPI at 49. And there's a cluster of ACC teams, if you're talking about Duke, from 43 to 53. You got Virginia 43, Virginia Tech 45, Georgia Tech 46, North Carolina 49, Louisville 50, Clemson 52, and Duke 53. Well, that's half your league is in 43 to 53. So that doesn't really, to me, give you many opportunities to jump up in the RPI because you're playing teams that are the same as you. And it just doesn't really help you especially when you're going against teams who are playing teams in the RPI that are 1, 2, 4, and 7 or 3 and 6 in the Big 12. I mean, and then add Ole Miss in there at 9. The highest rated ACC team is Notre Dame, and they're 10th. There are 5 SEC teams ahead of them and 2 Big 10 teams or 2 Big 12 teams and Fairfield. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know that they would be able to slide in there and that. I mean, but I'll say this, like Chris Burke said on the telecast yesterday, ain't anybody going to be excited to see Louisville rolling in as a 2. I can assure you of that.
I don't think it's the Louisville we've seen in the past. Their pitching, if you look at it, they're not nearly as top heavy on the weekend. And their bullpen's not nearly as deep. But, it was a talented team. You've seen pauses in schedules with COVID and, all sorts of stuff. I mean, look, crazy stuff happens in the postseason. And, it's possible Louisville is very much underachieved. It is more like the top 10 team we all thought, but really hasn't played like it so far. Yesterday's outcome, recognized, but to me that didn't move the needle for me, in my opinion, of Louisville.
No, it didn't me either. And they mentioned this on the telecast yesterday. It was May the 4th, and they beat Vanderbilt 7-2 yesterday. That was the first game Louisville had played at home since April 11th. They'd gone to Virginia for 3, played a midweek at Kentucky, had a home series with Pittsburgh that was COVID canceled, and then played last weekend at Clemson. So that was their first game at home in almost a month. And then they close with Duke at home, at Carolina, and Miami at home. So 6, 7 of their last 10 will be at home, but they hadn't been at home in quite a while. So that was an adjustment. That's probably something different for them. Hey, first time we've slept in our bed and gone to the ballpark in over a month to go play a game. So that may have a factor in it as well. And, they take out that series with Pittsburgh. I mean, who's to say they don't sweep Pittsburgh at home? And, maybe they're in the 30s or low 20s and they're in the conversation. But yeah, I just don't see Duke, North Carolina, and Miami, who are all eerily similar to Louisville, helping them make a pitch to get into the final 16 and be a tournament host with, the schedule they have left. I don't see that, but, other teams could falter, I guess, and they could move up too, but we'll kind of see how that plays out in the last couple of weeks.
Barry, I was going to get into some bubble teams and figure out who gets the last spots in Hoover and things like that today, but we've talked an hour and we'll just save that for tomorrow or maybe Friday. So anyway, it's been fun and just can't wait to have a lot of stuff to talk about down the stretch here as it's getting really interesting in the SEC.
Yeah, it really is. Like we talked about it yesterday, how fast the season's gone and 3 weeks left. And, this time next week, we'll we'll be down to 2 weeks. We'll be 2 weeks from Hoover, and we'll know our sites, or at least some of the teams in contention for sites. And but it's been a good, fun year, and there's a lot of good baseball left, and it'd be interesting last 3 weeks, going into Hoover and trying to figure out which 12 teams are going to Hoover. I think the bottom 4 are as interesting as the top 5, really, and just how things can shape out. And we'll probably get into that more tomorrow. But just looking at those bottom 4 teams, in the standings, I mean, there's a lot. They all play each other. I mean, we'll talk about that tomorrow, but they all play each other the last 3 weekends. So it's going to be it's going to be a tight race to see who wins the league, and it's going to be a tight race to see which 2 teams do not go to Hoover and stay at home. And it's a lot of excitement. And even in the middle, which teams are going to kind of play out in the middle, and who are the 6 through 10, 6 through 9, and see how that works out as well. So a lot of excitement, a lot of activity left, a lot of juggling in the standings as we head to the last 10 games of the season.
All right, well, that's it for today's episode of 14. For Barry Allen, I'm Chris Lee. Just reminding you to check out our website content. We got some power rankings up now, got some more coming. I'll put our 14 best hitters in the league up at some point today. That's always an interesting exercise to work through. Of course, we do podcasts almost every day here, or every day of the week. We should have one coming up Thursday and Friday. Be sure and follow us at 14 Southeastern on Twitter. Again, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast where you get those. You can also get those online if you don't have a podcast platform that you like. But anyway, thank you for listening to the Wednesday edition of the 14. We'll see you again with another show tomorrow.